on this computer. Thank you. And there we go. So, again, Brian, welcome to our UMW Chai and Chat, our second annual Chai and Chat. And Brian is author of Town Secrets, an Alex Archer adventure. And without further ado, Brian, we'd love to hear your voice read a section of this book, and then we can discuss some of the themes, some takeaways, some food for thought around the story that you're going to share with us, an excerpt of. So thank you and welcome.
Thank you, and it's my pleasure. So just to kind of give you a little background on the section that I'm going to read, this section centers around one of the main characters in the story, a woman named Marissa. Marissa's been trafficked, and this picks up kind of when she is semi-rescued. I'll just put it that way. So here we go. Excuse me. Ma'am, Glenn said, I know you've been through a lot and it may take you a minute, but I need some information about what happened. Do you have a little more time? She looked up with a very sad and weary but willing look and said, no, sir, I'm fine. What information do you need? Let's start with giving your name and where you're from. After giving Glenn her name and origins, Marissa began to tell us the story of how a young woman who had never left Connecticut somehow ended up in Patrician, Florida. She said it all began when she left Connecticut and met a man who showed her a lot of interest and attention at a really dark time in her life. Her father, who she described as her rock, was killed in a drug deal gone bad. She said he had been taking care of her on his own since she was 6 years old. Her mother left them when her father lost his job in steel distribution. To make ends meet, she said, he started selling marijuana on the side. It wasn't long before the money that he was making selling weed became too good to stop selling it. Things had returned to normal and even improved to better than normal, she said. So she and her father had resigned to the fact that selling weed and making money was their new normal. Everything was good until his partner came and told him that he wanted to expand into selling cocaine. She said her father was uneasy about it, but he was making good money with weed and really didn't see the need to do anything else. He ignored his gut feeling about it and went along with it to keep his relationship with his partner strong. Her last memory of her father was him walking out of the front door saying, see you in a second, baby girl. Daddy's got to go get this money. He normally would call her after he handled his business. She knew something was wrong when 2 hours went by and she heard no word from him. She called and texted him repeatedly and got no answer from either. Another hour passed and she got a phone call from her father's partner telling her to leave the house because her dad had been shot and some guys were coming to the house to get the money that he had stashed away in the basement. He told her to meet him at the park 2 blocks away so he could make sure she was safe. She said she took off out of the house like a bat out of hell. When she got about a block away from the park, she said she got a really bad feeling in her gut, like something horrible was about to happen. She doubled back, but took a different route back home. She hid in the shadow of an alley across the street from her house. A few minutes later, she saw a car pull up in front of the house, a car she knew very well. Her father's partner pulled up in front of the house and let 2 men out. Everything came together when she saw the men enter the house with a key instead of with force. She knew that her father had been set up. Even worse, she knew he was dead. Her father would never have given his keys to anyone for any reason, especially with his only daughter in the home alone. After her father's partner watched the men enter the house, he drove off and called Marissa to make sure that she was at the park. Instead of answering the call, she crushed her phone, threw it in a storm drain, and waited for the men to leave. Her father told her to always keep cash hidden in a spot where she could just grab it and run in the event that something ever happened to him. When the men left with 2 full duffel bags, she quickly entered the house, pulled up a loose floorboard under her bed, grabbed the cash, and quickly left the house. He always put some money in her stash spot after he made a run. By the time she grabbed it, there was $12,500 under her floor. She made her way to the bus station and bought a ticket to Washington, D.C. $12,500 is a decent amount of money, but after renting an apartment, buying a cheap car, and paying bills for a few months, that money began to run out pretty fast. Her father's friends who had promised to look out for her in the event that something happened to him did not follow through, even when she called for help. She knew she needed to start working before her money completely ran out. So she took a job as a makeup artist in Crystal City, just outside of DC in Virginia. A few weeks went by and things began to look up a little, but the pain of not having her father around continued to grow. The man who had anchored her was now gone, and she had no one to turn to. She had left Bridgeport without telling anyone, and she trusted no one to keep her location quiet. So with no one other than coworkers to connect with, she grew very lonely in DC. That all changed one day when she was at work in Crystal City. She said that while finishing up a woman's face, she was asked to fill in at the perfume counter at the store. She loved perfume and was very knowledgeable about the product, so it wasn't uncommon for her supervisor in that area to ask her to fill in when one of the normal girls was in the bathroom or at lunch. A few minutes after she arrived at the counter, a man she described as the most handsome man she had ever laid eyes on walked up to her perfume counter. 6 feet 3 inches, athletically built, caramel complexion skin with hazel eyes, a nicely groomed beard and short wavy hair. The weather was still chilly, so he was wearing a brown leather jacket, cream-colored ribbed turtleneck sweater, dark ripped jeans, and camel-colored boots. His diamond-studded watch, gold watch rather, caught her eye as much as his looks and his clothes. She said she was mesmerized when he started talking about her and wanting to pick up a fragrance for his mother's birthday, After showing him several fragrances, he asked her what her favorite fragrance was. She told him. He purchased 2 and told her that she could have one if she went to dinner with him tomorrow. He went on to explain that he had no other expectations than dinner and that she could just meet him at the restaurant of her choice, regardless of the price. She said no, but he persisted and told her that he would hold on to the bottle of perfumes in hopes that she would change her mind. If she didn't, the man said he would give the other bottle to his sister. With a wink, he walked away and waved goodbye. The next day, he showed up at the same time he showed up before. Only now he was in a business suit and overcoat. The perfume was gift wrapped with a bow. He walked up to the perfume counter and asked, "Is Marissa here today?" To which the perfume counter clerk replied, "Yes, she is. She's over at the makeup counter." After hearing her name, she said she looked up and saw him walking over with a gift wrap box. As he approached, she could see the perfume counter supervisor behind him, gawking and giving her the thumbs up signal. Hiding her smile as best she could, she asked, "You actually," or she said, she asked, "You actually showed up?" "Of course," he responded. "I'm a man of my word. Now, are you going to join me for dinner, or do I have to make up some reason why I bought my mother and sister the same bottle of perfume?" She said her gut told her to stick to her laurels and trust no one. She didn't know, but months of loneliness combined with the flattery of such a handsome man respectfully asking her on a date made his proposition a little difficult to resist. After a few moments of him standing with a patient, closed-mouth smile and the other girls nosily and obviously waiting for her response, she said, "I don't go on dates with men who don't tell me their name." "Wow. I didn't tell you my name, did I? I guess I was distracted by your smile." "My name is Tyson Lawrence. Do I qualify now, Marissa?" "I guess so. So where do you plan to take me?" "The choice is yours, Marissa. I'll leave that up to you, Tyson. You can tell a lot about a man based on where he takes a woman on a first date," she said. "Meet me at Fiona Rose by the river. Is 7 okay? I will be finished with my meetings for the day. I'll see you then." She says, "I look forward to it, Marissa. Enjoy the perfume and the rest of your day." As he backed away and turned to leave. She said the women at the makeup and perfume counter all watched as he walked out of the store. Once he left, all the women from the other counters came over to her to dish about the night to come. His workday ended at 5:00 p.m., and she rushed home to get ready for her date. Despite the flattery, she said, she told herself to just enjoy the night out and not to take this too seriously. She had never been to Fiona Rose, but she had heard of it, and she knew that it was a pricey restaurant. To make sure she made a good impression on Tyson at the restaurant, she wore a very elegant maroon off-the-shoulder fishtail style dress with heels to match and the sequins purse to accent the look. When Marissa arrived at Fiona Rose, she was taken aback by the elegance of the restaurant. The sound of soothing classical violin filled the air, and the hostess escorted her to the table where Tyson was waiting in a nicely tailored black suit. "You look amazing, Marissa," he said as she took her seat. Excuse me. She described the night as absolutely wonderful. Tyson was charming, smart, and polite, a perfect gentleman. He could talk about practically any subject that came up during the conversation, which really impressed her. As the night went on and a few glasses of wine were enjoyed, they discussed sports, travel, career, and goals. He told her that he had currently gotten into the import-export industries. The work paid well, he said, but sometimes it required heavy travel. She went on to tell him that she had just relocated from Washington, D.C. to Washington, D.C. from Bridgeport, Connecticut to start over after her father had passed away. He told her he could relate. He had lost an uncle who raised him after his father left his mother when he was a baby. The night ended after they finished 2 lobster tails, steamed mussels, coleslaw, and more wine. He escorted her to her car and asked her if she would see him again this weekend. She agreed, and they exchanged numbers. The follow-up date turned into another date. That date was followed by another date. Before long, Marissa said that she and Tyson were seeing each other regularly and that the relationship had blossomed. She began meeting his friends and taking weekend trips with him. On one particular trip, Marissa said that he was going to On one particular trip, Marissa said that he was going to Philadelphia for the weekend to secure a deal with a company to ship all their products to Florida. She thought it was strange that he'd be working a business deal on the weekend, but he told her that the client needed to meet today because he was working on other business to follow the following Monday. Marissa didn't want to be a distraction on the trip, but after some convincing, she went with him. He picked her up at about 5:00 p.m. and they headed north. During the ride to Philadelphia, Tyson told Marissa that he needed to stop in Baltimore first to tie up a loose end. They took an off-ramp and pulled into the parking lot of a diner near the Baltimore-Washington International Airport. They also parked on the side of the diner. "I need to make a call, baby," he said as he stepped out of the car. She said he was trying to talk in a low tone, but she managed to hear him say something along the lines of having arrived and what sounded like a brief description of the car they were in. He went to her side of the car and said, "I'll be right back, baby." He kissed her on the cheek. When he turned the corner of the diner, she said she felt an uneasiness come over her. Just as she thought to open the car door to exit, a large man opened the car door and held her arms. She says she remembered letting out a scream before seeing another man enter the driver door and place a white cloth over her face. The next thing she remembered was waking up on a small plane as it was going down the runway. Next to her was the large man who had opened Tyson's car door. She described the plane as having propellers and not being very big. So the large man sitting next to her seemed to take up most of the space. "Where are we going and where is Tyson?" she asked. He didn't say anything, but his cold stare and facial expression told her everything she needed to know. She was in trouble and didn't need to say another word. Behind her was another man, not large like the one next to her, but it was clear from the way that he looked and talked that he was in control of everything that was going on. He wouldn't speak directly to her, but instead relayed messages through the large man sitting next to her. The man in the back would lean forward, say something to the man in another language, and then the man next to her would ask her if she was thirsty or hungry. What felt like an hour passed before the plane began to descend. You want me to continue, Simran?
Every time I hear this section of the book, it's like I'm on the edge of my seat and I know that probably some of our listeners are too. Um, but we'll take a pause for a brief moment. And can you tell us a little bit about these two characters and just um, how they came to you in development? Um,
Yeah.
Glenn
Oh, I'm
and
sorry.
oh no, just Glenn and this victim
Yes.
who's trafficked.
Yeah. Yeah. Glenn, because if you remember at the start of the passage, Glenn was a person that was asking her the questions. Glenn is a police officer who is the best friend of the main character, Alex Archer. And Glenn, I developed Glenn. I wanted to have a police officer in the story. You can't have a crime story without police. But I wanted to have a cop who was a very upstanding guy. He's actually inspired, by a young man that I used to coach, who is now a U.S. Marshal, and he's a very just upstanding kid that very respectful kid, very honest, upstanding kind of guy. So I wanted Glenn to be that kind of character. And so, a lot of police officers get a bad rap. I know a lot of police officers that are very good and upstanding guys. So I wanted to kind of give a nod out to them because I know there's a lot of tension between the public, particularly in communities of color, and the police, but the upstanding and good ones are instrumental in making strides in a lot of these human trafficking cases. So I wanted to have a person like that represented. Marissa, I didn't want her to just be the classic damsel in distress. I wanted there to be depth to the character. I wanted the reader to really have a heart for her and gain an interest in her as a person. I wanted people to feel for her, and so I really wrote her story as just kind of a good girl, a good young woman who found her way into trouble. Because a lot of my studies, as I was studying and researching this topic, a lot of my studies led me to that being the type of young woman who ends up in this type of situation. A young woman who is looking for somebody to be good to her, a young woman who is maybe a little naive, or she might not even be naive, because Marissa is not a naive character, because of the line of what her father was doing. She couldn't be naive, but she was vulnerable. And I wanted to highlight those things because those are the things that traffickers prey upon. They prey upon young women who are lonely. They prey upon young women who are naive, or they prey upon young women who are in some type of trouble. That tends to be a big one. A young woman who's in some type of trouble. She's homeless, or she's been, put out of her house, or something like that. She's lost a job, and things are hard. So someone kind of comes in to fill this void, but in all reality, they're preying upon these young women. So I wanted Marissa to kind of encapsulate all of that.
Thank you so much, Brian. I know we discussed very briefly before we started recording, how you got into the topic of human trafficking. And I know you had mentioned to me in the past the National Human Trafficking hotline and website. And so I'm going to share that very briefly. But this scenario that you just described with Marissa, you know, um, dating someone who she thought she could trust when she was looking, to find someone to be there to take care of, especially after being displaced from where she lived for safety reasons. Can you tell us again a little bit about what brought you to the theme of human trafficking and writing about that, and why this particular story that Alex is around? And I know we didn't read that part about how Alex came to find Marissa and then called Glenn.
Right.
Um, but I think we'd love to hear a little bit more about that aspect of the topic, why, and what we should know um, as everyday people going through our lives about looking for the signs, to be able to intervene, to be an active bystander.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. As far as how I came to the topic again of human trafficking, it was, like I said earlier, it was just a topic that had disturbed me very deeply when I heard that there were so many women in the Black community alone that were missing. And these were women that ranged in age from 12 to about 35. And so the fact that it was not being talked about on any news station, regardless of their political bent, no one was talking about it. And so that not only perplexed me, or disturbed me rather, but it also perplexed me. Because that is a very serious issue. And so then digging into it more and finding out that a lot of Indigenous women were missing, a lot of Latina women were missing, women from the white community, European, trans community. There were women just missing from all communities, and no one was talking about it. And so it caused me to really just look into it a lot more. And like I said, that I decided that would be the issue that Alex Archer touched on, that he confronted rather. And the second part to that question, Simran, was what were you asking?
um, how Alex comes to find this character in their vulnerability,
Right,
and
right,
what vulnerability looks like at different ages.
yes,
Marissa is a college age student,
right,
and Marissa is working. She's trying to save up money. You know, women, I remember when I was single, dating, all these things that we would do. Tell your friend where you're going, have somebody to text, all these things that people do to try to guard. Um, but in this situation, the vulnerability was just this trust.
right.
Um, and I know you talked about that, but what stood out to me as a reader, and I'll get to the question, is uh, the trafficker was someone that she was dating,
Right,
someone that she had already dated once or twice before. And it wasn't somebody that, she went out clubbing one night and was kidnapped, it was
right,
somebody that she trusted.
right,
And it's really disturbing to see that oftentimes this is something that victims experience from people who they trust. What was it like writing about those examples, and how Alex as a character kind of he intervened? What made you think about Alex intervening in that way, or even having the courage to intervene? Because I know, like, I go out in the world and I'm so zoned in because sometimes I don't even want to observe what's around me because I'm like, I just need to go in and out. Um, how do we pay more attention? How did Alex pay more attention?
Well, Alex, when I was developing the character, I wanted to develop a character who was just a good man, particularly a good Black man, seeing that there are so many negative representations of people who look like me in the media. So I just wanted him to be a good guy. So that was one of the driving forces, and wanted him to be a good guy to the point that it would push him and propel him into action. I think it was Sir Edmund Hillary that said the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing. So that's kind of what is kind of a silent mantra for him, is that if he sees something, he's going to do something. And that's the message that I wanted Alex to communicate, was that in order for this topic or this subject, this ill on our society to be addressed, that it's going to take good people doing something. It's not going to take, and it doesn't have to be some superhero, some super soldier. It doesn't have to be that person. It can be anyone. And it can be anyone, and not just anyone in any situation can do something. And with Marissa, as far as her vulnerabilities, I wanted to highlight those, but I also wanted to highlight her isolation. Because if you notice in the passage that I had read, Marissa had no one. She had no one. There were people that her father knew that said, yeah, we'll look out for her, but they didn't. So she was literally on an island alone. And so that was something also that traffickers look for. They ask questions like, okay, who's your family? You know, brothers and sisters, would anyone be concerned if you went missing? And Marissa was the type that no one would really be concerned if she went missing. No one would really know. It would just be just another day. And so I wanted Marissa to be kind of a cautionary tale of not isolating yourself, always letting someone know what's going on with you. Have some checks and balances for your own life. Have some safeguards for your life so that someone will be concerned if you are missing.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Brian. Part of the reason why our alumni affinity group wanted to talk about this topic is because so many of us alumni, especially from minoritized communities, when we go to college, we either come out or we realize who we are and we step into our own person. And so often that is separate from, like, the family of origins we come from, or we move to a new state for a job, or all these things that might cause a lot of disruption. And so this sense of like building community, being grounded, having that sense of, even if you might be isolated from a state or location, that there are people there for you, that as a young adult, you have that capacity. And that as we become alumni, part of us reaching back out to current students is this also desire to let them know that there are other people from their cultures, identities, who have gone through, what they're going through in the college developmental process, and that on the other end of graduation, they're going to find us.
Right.
And I wanted to ask you that Alex Archer is a veteran, and a lot of our alumni are also veterans. And I know we didn't read a section about Alex Archer that talks about his veteran experience,
Right.
but for those of our alumni who might be veterans and people of color listening in, the whole story starts with Alex, retiring from the Air Force and what that transition was like. Can you tell us a little bit more about the different types of transitions your characters go through, the protagonist Alex Archer goes through, with this like homecoming trip, and
Right.
what that looks like readjusting back to his hometown. I forget the name of the city. Is it Penn?
Patricia,
Patricia.
Florida.
It's a fiction, not a real place, but Patricia, Florida. What that transition was like, and how you came to write about the veteran story.
Right. Yeah. Well, my father's a veteran. He's a Marine Corps veteran, and the fact that I made Alex an Air Force veteran, that kind of rubbed him a little wrong, but he got over it. But I wanted that was an experience that I had watched my father go through. So it was very easy to kind of relate that into the character, not just my father, but several men and women that he served with, all through his career. There were several that somehow we would always end up at the same duty station. So I got to not only watch my father make that transition, but I got to watch his friends make that transition. So like I said, it was very easy to kind of put that into the character, because there's a lot of excitement when they retire. They do their 20 years, 25, 30 years, however many they do. There is excitement, relief about a new chapter in life. And so I wanted to build that up because that's something that a lot of veterans are looking forward to. They've worked very hard in the military for 20 years, and they're just like, look, I want to find something that I like to do and, take it easy from this point on. And so I wanted to build that up, so that, you could see Alex having kind of a conflict with that. Like, look, I'm just trying to enjoy my life. Now here comes this situation that I am forced to confront. So it's like, okay, do I confront this situation, or do I just go on with the life that I've worked 20 plus years to provide for myself? And so, because something like that, especially, I know me, just I don't like trouble and running into troublesome situation. I'll sooner walk away from a conflict than engage in one. And especially now that I'm 50 years old. But so that's a challenge, to do the right thing when you are looking to just have your own peace. So that was an internal struggle of his that he had to confront. And I wanted the reader to see that though he wanted this peace and this good and nothing was wrong with that, but he chose to do the right thing instead.
I don't know if anyone else felt that. I was like, yes, like so much energy just existing as like people of color, women of color, conserving your energy, choosing which battle, paying more attention to certain things that come your way than others. It can drain your energy. But in this case, this is something that is not something that is like happening necessarily to Alex. Like, he encounters Marissa shortly after she had just been trafficked and was just really attentive to the situation and did some things to be an active bystander. And I know we didn't read that part, but spoiler alert, this is again just the very beginning of the book. There's a whole other part of the book that you got to keep reading. But how did Alex become an active bystander, and what does it mean to be an active bystander, and what are some other strategies that we can think of, as alumni, as readers, as we think about, and make that difficult decision of, am I going to protect my peace, or am I going to do something, say something in this moment? What are some other ways that I can intervene when I see an unsafe situation, whether it's something extreme like human trafficking, or even something that might be, corrupt or unethical? I'd love to hear a little bit more about your insights on like why that way of intervening, because like it does make Alex Archer like this veteran hero who's like, yeah, I'm going to intervene. I'm going to call my cop friend Glenn. Like, not all of us have a cop friend we trust,
Right.
or a Glenn in our lives. We can just say, hey, I'm in this situation. What do I do?
Right.
So I'm curious
Very
to
good
hear
point.
your advice for that, for the rest of us, on intervening and being an active bystander.
Right. Well, in this, like she said, a little bit of a spoiler alert. In this, the way he meets Marissa is that after she's trafficked, she is basically made to sell her body. And she approaches him. And he kind of just notices, he is a pilot. He's a retired pilot, Air Force guy, so he's trained militarily to notice things. And so he notices that she's in trouble. And I think I wrote a little bit of the internal struggle he was having. He was like, against my better judgment, I asked her, "Are you in trouble?" And she responded, yes. And so he then, pretended to take her somewhere to get her away from the guys so he could call his cop friend who did come and intervene. But if you read the book, then something else does happen. But I wanted to communicate to the reader that there is always something you can do. Are you going to spring into action like Wesley Snipes in Passenger 57? No. But there is something you can do, whether it is call the police. There are there are activist groups that are out there, as the number, such as the group that Simran posted earlier, rather, that you can call, who will come in and actually, they have people who are trained to intervene. Then yes, the National Human Trafficking Hotline, you can call these numbers and you can put information out there. Hey, I'm with this young woman or with this child, because child trafficking, that's an entirely different thing, is equally as horrible. But things there are resources that you can tap into that will help a person like a Marissa, to where you won't have to go on an adventure to rescue somewhere, have someone rescued, such as Alex and his friends did. There are even churches, I've heard stories of, there are churches who are dedicated to this sort of thing, that you can call these churches and they have things set in place to where they will help get a young woman out of harm's way. So I just wanted the reader to see that there is something that can be done. And if something being done is a lot better than nothing being done.
Oh, thank you so much. And it's so much easier to like just say, here's the hotline, here's the number. But it does take courage and there is risk involved. So this theme of like making the decision, when and how to make the decision, and how to deal with everything that comes with whatever you do decide to do.
Right.
And I like Alex Archer, and I hope that one day it turns into a TV show, like a whole series, because each chapter of your book kind of takes us through this journey of like how he retired, what happens when he gets to patrician, his family, the spirituality around that. Can you talk a little bit about themes about having that tight knit family, extended family that Alex does? Because again, I feel like the book does such a good job at just smashing those stereotypes, as much as it is shedding light on a very serious, topic such as human trafficking. It also has these wonderful moments where it's like smashing those myths, right, that people have of like the absent father or the broken family. Alex is a whole person, a whole family unit. Tell us a little bit about where those inspirations come from. He has this social justice sister, or social justice warrior sister, and I like how you write that, because our alumni group, we're big on like, we're all social justice warriors, like we want to talk about these things. But he and his sister are kind of almost like foils of one another in the book. So I'd love for you to talk about how African American family systems and what this book does to kind of tell that story as well.
Right. Yeah, again, I wanted Alex Archer to be a positive representation of a Black man, and in not just himself, but in every way, his family, his support group, his friends. I purposely wrote it, wrote it, it's not a word. I purposefully wrote the characters around him, his cousins, friends. I wanted them to be successful as well, because again, there are so many negative images of Black men, Black women, the Black family in the media, where in reality, most people that I knew, Black people that I knew, came from two-parent homes. And so I wanted that to be highlighted. And I wanted not only that to be highlighted, I wanted the impact of an intact Black family highlighted as well. So I made sure that I did write that he had great relationships with his parents, great relationships with his sister, his friends, his cousins, everyone that he was with. I wanted to highlight that area, the idea of community, because that's how I grew up. I grew up in a two-parent home. Patrician is loosely based off of, well, at least the scenes, the home scenes, the barbecues, those things. That's based off of my experiences in my hometown of New Smyrna Beach, Florida, right outside of the Daytona Beach area. That's just kind of how it was, when one person pulled up, a family member pulled up that we hadn't seen in years, somebody fired up the grill, someone went to the store, bought all kinds of food and drinks and everything. And it just became this big party to where in my neighborhood on Sheldon Street, the neighborhood would come out when we would do that. And so it was just this positive image of Black people that I wanted to pour into the character. And wanted people to see that's not uncommon, not as uncommon as people would think, as the media would lead you to think. And I wanted all of that to really influence the character, because those types of experiences shape us as people, regardless of your ethnicity, culture, whatever. Those types of experiences can shape you positively. And so it was those types of experiences that kind of made Alex into who he is, made him to where he would be the type of person that would take action. As far as his sister, Devin, she's loosely based on my sister, who I just lost to breast cancer a couple of months ago. So yeah, Devin is based off of my sister, Crystal. And Crystal could really, once Crystal got onto something, she was on it and she stayed on it. And that was communicated through the character Devin, in how she would just, when something got in her head that she needed to get out, she made sure that she talked about it. She got a hold of somebody until she'd talk their ear about it. But her thing was that she wanted action, and she would talk about it until she got action, and she even began to create action herself. So, but all of that came from their family. It all came from their family, their interactions with family and community.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And thank you so much for sharing how your sister has left her mark in this character. And I feel that all the readers will get a little feel for that sibling love there. But again, very sorry for your loss, but I really admire how you have woven the characters in your life and your own experience with the characters in Alex Archer. Um, my question next for you is for our alumni of color who will be watching this on their own time or later on our YouTube channel. What are some ways that we see Alex channeling, all the emotions he has as he confronts all these evils at like a different systemic level?
Right.
With Marissa, with the city he's in, with the leadership, and then with this family unit and the decisions he has to make. What are some strategies he uses as an African American veteran, retired veteran, to like cope? And what are some takeaways we could have as readers of color to how we could potentially also make room in our lives to navigate the stresses that come with these difficult decisions of, do I fight this battle? Do I intervene with this issue? Do I keep moving forward? Um, would really love your insight on the character development and strategies for that, and what it might be as a takeaway for a reader.
Yeah, sure. Very good question. As far as Alex is concerned, I wanted a character who was the type of person that would keep his wits about him. And I know several pilots, and that is one thing that they will tell you, is that in a troublesome situation, engine goes out, worst case scenario, or they call them bird impacts, I believe, when I was studying, like a bird hits or something. They are trained to keep their wits about them. I mean, you would have to. I mean, you're several thousand feet above the ground in this very heavy machine that you've got to keep in the air. Panicking is not going to do anything. And so I wanted Alex to be the type of person that in trouble, he could, in a troublesome, chaotic situation, he could think and he could keep his wits about him. So that's why I made him a pilot. My dad, like I said, he wanted him to be a Marine, but I said, you guys, you Marines think differently. I wanted him to be a guy that just kept his wits about him. And so, because in situations like this, I know it would be, we all see the action movies where something happens and there's some hard charger runs in there and he just handles the situation. Well, it's entertainment and we love watching it, especially people like me. I love watching action movies, but it's not always reality. And so you're not always going to have a situation to where you're going to just kick a door down and save the day. Sometimes there's planning, there's thinking, there's reasoning that comes into play that needs to happen. So I wanted to pour all of that into Alex, and I thought that a pilot would be the best person or best type of person to put into that situation. So yeah, I really wanted to emphasize that, and especially emphasize that in a Black man. I know I keep coming back to that, but again, a lot of the images that we have, painted of us are not like an Alex Archer, not a cool, calm, collective, witty, smart person who handles things with his mind first, fists if he has to. And that's what I wanted to create in him.
Thank you so much for sharing that insight, because I got, two younger brothers. They're not Black, but they're brown. I got a Black brother-in-law who's also retired Air Force. And, a pattern that I see just in young men and is this, we get built, they're working out, they're lifting weights. And it's this, again, so much of this pressure to you look a certain way as a Black or brown male. You have to, in order to be strong, in order to feel like you can be a force to reckon with problems that come your way. But that Alex recognizes his physical strengths, but also centers his systems level thinking,
Right.
What the impacts would be and what safety looks like beyond just you're physically protecting yourself, but also emotionally protecting your well-being and looking out for the people around you.
Right.
My next set of questions is not so much about Alex Archer, but it's also for those of us who are alumni that are tuning in or might be watching this at a later time, interested in also going into writing or publishing. What was your writing journey like? What does writing look like as a full-time track and field coach? Finding time for writing. What are some practical tips that you have for alumni of color who are dealing with all these things, coming out of a pandemic, coming out of all these social protests? Every day there's something new on the news that we see that overwhelms us. How do we find the time to write? How do we find the time to write creatively?
Right. That's a very good question. And I get that question a lot, especially during the time in which I wrote it. Like I said, I wrote it I finished it prior to the pandemic. And so this is when all that activity was beginning to ramp up. There's really no finding time to write. You have to make time. You have to, that's just the honest answer. You have to make time, especially if you have another vocation that you have to give attention to. You have to make time, and that's what I did. Just any free time that I had, I would spend it writing. My good friend that introduced himself, Jahan Irons, we were teaching together when I wrote this book. And so he was my team lead. And so there were several times that he would come to get me to go get tell me it was time to pick up my class, because I had been using my planning period to write. So I was basically making time. I would finish any work that I had to do, and I would just crack open my laptop and I would begin to write. I would write at home. So the biggest tip that I could give is always make time to write. because you can, especially with it being a writer, an idea will pop into your head. And so you need to write it down, at least make a note about it to, okay, I'm going to build upon this part and put it to my story or into whatever you're writing. So you have to make time. There's really, until I get to that Stephen King level, I'm going to have to make time. He has time to write. That's what he does full time, but I have to make it. I have to make that time.
Okay, I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna set my timer. I'm gonna set an alert. I'm gonna say 10 minutes. 10
Yes.
minutes, in between my lunch break, during my 15, I'm just gonna speak into my phone. I might not actually be writing it, might be voice to text. But there's something about putting pen to paper than like my fast little fingers that are always typing on text. I feel like that's how I do most of my writing. uh, can you also speak to us a little bit about your graduate school journey? Many of
Yeah.
us alumni, we graduated, like I graduated 11, 12 years ago. As I speak to more and more of my peers of color from UMW, we feel like, okay, maybe it might be too late to go back to school, or, it's been 10 years since I graduated or 5 years since I graduated. Um, you have a very unique education path as well.
Right.
And can you tell us a little bit about your lifelong learning journey and any takeaways for our alumni of color who might be the first in their family to go to college, but also the first in their family to go to graduate school?
Sure.
How do you
I
come to
will,
that now?
I will do that in a second. I have to address this issue at the classroom
Perfect.
floor. So give me 1 second. I'm
No
sorry.
worries. We're right here waiting for you. And so while we're waiting for Brian, I'm going to very quickly share the screen to show you that we do have a University of Mary Washington Multicultural Alumni Affinity Group Instagram page. And so we do frequently post here programs and events that we'll be highlighting. And if you would like to be featured on our Instagram page, you can select the link tree, and the link tree will allow you to fill out a brief, Google Doc and form to share information. And that way, current students, past alumni can connect with you on social media, because I know not all of us go on LinkedIn and not all of us check our emails. And increasingly, social media is the main way that we stay in touch. So this page is pretty new. We've got 62 followers, but we've got a lot of alumni. So share your stories with us, send that to us, and like us and follow us. Additionally, if you have not yet opted in to our Multicultural Alumni Affinity Group website, there's a link that takes you right there, the year you graduated. And that way you can share this with your friends and stay in touch with all of the alumni programming that is happening. Thank you so much. And so we return now to Brian sharing a little bit about his graduate school journey and telling us what that might look like.
Yeah. Sorry about that. The security was coming, doing their rounds, and just making sure things were good. So
No worries. Thank you so much.
yeah, no problem. But as far as grad school for me, I decided to go back to grad school, just to make a give me more opportunities in the education sector. I did it online. I went back to school, because when you're supporting a family and working full time, pursuing a degree, you can't just go to a classroom. At least I couldn't. So so I just decided to go back and get a degree in educational leadership, so that I could have more opportunities in education. Still exploring those options, as we speak, just which directions I would want to go. But it opened a lot of doors for me that I'm very grateful for. But it was very interesting going back to school, in my 40s. That was a very interesting experience. But I was a lot more responsible in my 40s versus going and getting my degree at a younger age. But it was, I I enjoyed the process. I really enjoyed the process, and it really made me focus more on being a lifelong learner. A lot of times it's very easy to get set in your ways, but I saw that getting back into education and having to read and learn and expound upon the knowledge that I gained from reading, it's carried on. It's been a benefit. I think I went back and got my graduate degree 10 years ago, and it's been a benefit in more than just employment opportunities. It's been a benefit just as far as is how I approach knowledge and being a lifelong learner.
Thank you so much. At this point, I wanted to just say thank you for answering all our questions, from character development to the themes to how to intervene, what resources are there for human trafficking, to talking about your own writing journey and what exploring graduate school looked like, uh, beyond undergrad. Uh, we're going to start closing soon, but I wanted to give those of our friends who are with us right now an opportunity to ask you any questions they might have, or if they've read the book, to this opportunity to ask the author. And so we're going to open the floor up to questions from some of our Zoom friends online with us at this time. Just any comments or questions about Brian's wonderful debut novel.
I'll go. I'm not an alumni, but I do know Brian. I call him B Love. B Love, which I wrote a review on Amazon. I think it's an amazing book. Two questions. One, when is part 2 coming out? And the second question would be, when you write, are you old school typewriter? Are you on Mac computer? Are you using your iPhone? Like, the host mentioned she uses Word to text. So just curious, when you're in your zone, how do you get those thoughts out of your head onto paper?
Yeah, great questions. And Monty, I really appreciate you being here. We went to undergrad together many moons ago. So as far as the sequel, Alex Archer Part 2, I am working on that as we speak. I just finished chapter 13, and I'm starting chapter 14. I just finished it, started chapter 14 rather yesterday. And so the way the story is kind of flowing right now, it's going to be probably another 4 to 5 chapters, and I anticipate getting done probably within the next 2 months. I'm really focusing. I had, moving up here and then, losing my sister a few months ago, that really kind of put a pause in things. I was on track to finish this one in about 5 months, like I did the other one, but 5 months have turned into 10 at this point. So, so I'm looking at getting it done within the next 2 months. As for my process, when you mentioned the typewriter, all I could think was those old, I think like at the end of Hill Street Blues, they had Stephen J. Cannell and he pulled the paper out. Now I'm a little more advanced than that, maybe a little more, but I just crack open the laptop and just kind of, Mr. Freeze. I just kind of crack open the laptop and I use Google, Microsoft Word rather. Yeah, and use that and just go for it.
Thank you so much for your question. Any additional?
I probably dated myself really good mentioning Hill Street Blues.
Oh no, that was a great question. That's okay. I feel like I'm an older millennial. I remember having a typewriter in elementary school.
Right.
Before those Mac computer came out with like the different colors on the background. Anyhow, still remember Windows when they had the rainbow apple or Apple when they had that. But any other questions, thoughts, or comments for Brian on the book, on his journey on writing, publishing, grad school? Um, and Brian, also, what are some other ways that readers can reach you? Can we find you on LinkedIn or Instagram if we start reading the book on our own time and are like, well, we need to ask the author this question, forgot to ask it during the Zoom conference and meeting?
Yeah. Yes. I am on LinkedIn. You can find me there. And a lot of I'm a Facebooker, so you can find me on Facebook as well. But yeah, those are probably two easiest places to find me.
Thank you. Any other final questions or thoughts for Brian?
Sure, I will ask a question. So all of this research that you've done in such a very sensitive area, how has it kind of fundamentally changed you and your perception of the world? Are you kind of looking over your shoulder? Do you have kind of more of an acute awareness about your surroundings and maybe other people in your circle?
Very good question. And all of that. Yes. It when you research a topic like this, it really lets you know that as beautiful a world and that we have is equally dark a world that we have. I'm currently have researched other aspects of human trafficking for the book that I'm writing now. And you just really it makes me aware that there just are some really not bad, but just evil people out there. And so, it's made me aware that these evil people are not, grotesque Morlock looking people. These are people in suits and ties. These are people that wear uniforms. These are people that teach in our schools. These are people who are everywhere. So I think I closed chapter 1 with kind of a nod to that, what I just said, that, it let us, that they finally were aware that there were monsters around. And so, yeah, it's made me very, very aware, a lot more cautious of what I get involved in, who I get involved with, and just where I let my feet take me. It's made me very aware of those things.
We had a comment from one of our alumni, Jocelyn. She said, "This sounds like a fantastic book. I cannot wait to start reading. Thank you for sharing with us." And so for all of our alumni watching this at a later time or with us right now, we are giving away 10 copies of the book to 10 of the first 10 participants who registered for this evening's virtual program. And so I'm just going to let Philip know right now, like Jocelyn is one of them, definitely. Jocelyn, you'll be getting a copy in the mail within the next 2 to 3 weeks, maybe even sooner. We're just getting those orders out for alumni. So certainly, Jocelyn, if you would feel free to reach out to the MAG group. If your address is on file with Alumni Relations, we'll get that copy of the book to you when you registered. With that said, we're about 10 minutes shy of 9 o'clock. I have enjoyed my chai, aka my strawberry Gatorade. I've been through most of my bottle, and I really enjoyed hearing every time I speak with Brian about the book. I learned something new, a new perspective, a new insight. And so I hope that it was just as enjoyable for all of our participants who are viewing now or who might be viewing later on YouTube, or our friends at UMW Alumni Relations and the Multicultural Center. I hope that, we can continue to be in community with you, Brian, as an affinity group. When Alex Archer 2 comes out, we're going to have to do another chai and chat.
I look forward
feature
to it.
you to our alumni and learn more about the creative writing and ways that we can be lifelong learners and center social justice and continue to think about these real ills in our world by also being in community with one another. So with that said, thank you. I'm gonna unmute. I'm just gonna give you a round of applause so you can hear that. Thank you so much
Thank you. Thank
for your
you all.
time.
I really appreciate each and every one of you coming out to listen to me. I truly mean this from the bottom of my heart. This is an honor. This is an honor.
Lovely. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here this evening. We're going to stop recording and we're just going to